Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we are absolutely geeking out over the architecture of HTTP/2. We're going to look at exactly how this standard totally revolutionized web architecture by tearing down a massive text-based bottleneck, a bottleneck that honestly held the internet back for almost 2 decades. So let's jump right into the first principles of this system optimization.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for the explainer. We're starting with the HTTP 1.1 bottleneck, moving into the binary paradigm shift, and then hitting the binary framing layer. From there, we'll deconstruct streams, messages, and frames, outline the lifecycle and communication flow, and finally, wrap up with the advantages and remaining challenges. All right, Section 1, the HTTP/1.1 bottleneck.
So when HTTP/2 was finally standardized back in 2015 as RFC 7540, it was a direct, urgent reaction to the numbers you're seeing here. You know, early web pages were super modest, mostly just plain text. But today, an average page load requires pulling down over 1.9 megabytes of data across anywhere from 100 to 300 separate HTTP requests. We're talking HTML, CSS, massive JavaScript bundles, images, API calls, the whole shebang. Now, sure, HTTP/1.1 did improve things early on by letting us reuse TCP connections, but it utterly failed to scale with this massive explosion in resource density. It just couldn't handle the sheer volume.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why. It all comes down to a nasty little problem called application layer head-of-line blocking. Think of it like this. You're at the supermarket, waiting in the checkout queue. The person right at the front has this incredibly complex, time-consuming transaction. Maybe they're paying in pennies, who knows? Everyone behind them is just stuck, right? It literally doesn't matter if you're only buying a pack of gum. That was HTTP 1.1. If one big request was delayed, the entire pipeline behind it just ground to a halt. To bypass this, developers had to rely on these awful, hacky kludges, like spriting to stitch images together or sharding to serve files across multiple hostnames, literally just to trick the browser into opening more concurrent connections. To fix this mess without, completely breaking the existing web, the IETF's HTTP Biz working group had to set some incredibly strict design goals. First off, they had to maintain the core client, server, and TCP paradigms. They absolutely had to preserve standard HTTP and HTTPS URIs, no changing the URLs we all type every day. They needed to ensure one-to-one proxy compatibility, and they completely removed optionality to make the implementations much more robust. Oh, and here's a fun one. No minor versions allowed. Any future updates would require a full version leap, which, spoiler alert, eventually gave us HTTP/3. Ultimately, HTTP/2 had to fundamentally change how data was transported without changing how REST APIs or standard HTTP semantics actually function under the hood.
Moving on to Section 2, the binary paradigm shift. If we put these two side by side, the differences are just stark. HTTP/1.1 was entirely text-based, using ASCII. It relied on serial delivery and used stateless, highly repetitive headers. But HTTP/2, it shifts to binary framing, it unlocks full multiplexing, and introduces HPAC compressed headers. Now, that last point, HPAC, is an absolute game changer. It's a clever, security-conscious indexing strategy that compresses all that repetitive header bloat without exposing the connection to nasty information leakage attacks. The beautiful thing here is that your application still creates the exact same request, but the format actually flying across the wire is totally different. When we step back and look at the overarching architecture, it is super vital to remember that HTTP/2 absolutely remains an application layer protocol. It still fundamentally relies on TCP to get data reliably from point A to point B. The big swap is that it replaces all that variable text with a strict, fixed offset binary protocol. And honestly, the best part for us developers, you don't have to rewrite your web apps, not at all. The application layer never sees this binary format directly. Your standard HTTP libraries step in and handle all the encoding and decoding completely transparently. So why go binary in the first place? Well, honestly, parsing text is just computationally expensive. Think about it. The server has to split strings, hunt around for specific text delimiters like carriage returns, process line endings, and convert values. It's a lot of work. Binary protocols completely bypass all of that nonsense. By using fixed offsets, the system knows exactly where to look for data every single time. This means a much smaller footprint, zero text delimiter hunting, blazing fast parsing, and way lower CPU overhead. When you're dealing with massive concurrency at scale, This kind of efficiency is, for sure, a real lifesaver. Okay, section 3, the binary framing layer.
So the absolutely crucial point to take away here is that the binary framing layer is the heartbeat of this entire standard. It's the core innovation that makes the rest of the system possible. This layer sits right between the high-level HTTP semantics we know and love and the underlying TCP transport. Instead of sending an entire request as one massive, clunky text message, this dedicated layer deconstructs the communication into discrete, highly manageable binary units. And because we've chopped that data down into these tiny binary pieces, the binary framing architecture suddenly unlocks a whole suite of advanced features that were practically impossible before. Check this out. It enables multiplexing, flow control, which lets the endpoints manage their buffer space intelligently, and dynamic prioritization. That means a browser can literally tell the server, hey, this CSS file is way more important than that background image. Plus, of course, it enables that HPAG header compression we just talked about. It's a massive upgrade.
Next up, section 4, streams, messages, and frames.
Let's break down the anatomy here. First, we have the stream. Think of a stream as an independent, bidirectional logical communication channel operating within a single HTTP2 TCP connection. It's kind of like having one giant physical pipe, but inside it you've got dozens of separate virtual channels running concurrently, and none of them interfere with each other. Each stream carries exactly one request-response exchange. Which naturally brings up the question, why streams? Like, how do we eliminate the need for multiple TCP connections while still parallelizing our data? Well, streams are the magic bullet. Because of streams, a slow, heavy image transfer on one channel is no longer going to block the critical CSS loading on another channel. It completely eliminates the need for those old-school hacks like domain sharding. Now, a single TCP connection can efficiently service all the resources your page needs at once. Now, zooming in a bit more, inside those streams, we have messages and frames. Messages map perfectly to the standard HTTP semantics you're already used to, the methods, the headers, the body. But those messages are actually chopped up into frames, which are the smallest binary units transmitted over the wire. Every single frame follows a strict, universal 5-part structure. You've got length, type, flags, a stream identifier, and the payload itself. And the most common types you'll see are headers for your metadata and data frames for the actual content. Now, what's really interesting about this hierarchy is the strict one-to-many relationship. This is literally the foundational model you want to memorize, especially if you have an interview coming up. First, at the base, you have the connection. That's your physical TCP tunnel. Inside that connection, you have streams, the logical concurrent flows. Inside a stream, you'll find the message, the complete HTTP request or response. And finally, that message is assembled from frames, the smallest binary chunks. And because each frame carries a stream identifier, the receiving end can just stitch them all back together perfectly. It's like a giant puzzle that solves itself.
All right, let's put this into motion. Section 5, Lifecycle and Communication Flow. If we trace the life cycle of a request chronologically, right at T0 milliseconds, we do our standard TCP handshake. But almost immediately after, HTTP2 kicks in with ALPN, that's Application Layer Protocol Negotiation, to securely agree on the protocol over TLS. By the 100 millisecond mark, boom, we are seamlessly interleaving frames. And here's a huge shift from HTTP 1.1. This connection doesn't just constantly open and close. It becomes a persistent connection that can happily stay active for minutes or even hours.
I absolutely love this analogy for how the communication flows. Picture a busy railway network. In HTTP/2, individual wagons, which represent our frames, from completely different trains, our messages, are freely mixed and interleaved onto a single track, which is our one TCP connection. They all travel mixed together and are smoothly sorted and reassembled at the final station. And if you ever need to cancel a request, no problem. HTTP/2 just sends a reset frame, RST_stream. It basically pulls one specific train off the tracks without blowing up the entire railway line. Pretty elegant, right?
Finally, Section 6, Advantages and Remaining Challenges. Look, the advantages of HTTP/2 are simply undeniable. The combination of binary efficiency and multiplexing leads to a massive, drastic reduction in network round trips. It completely wipes out the need for those awful kludges like domain sharding or file concatenation. It scales beautifully when you hit high concurrency, and it provides some major latency mitigation, which is absolutely critical if you're on a mobile device dealing with a spotty, high-latency network.
Let's move to the challenges and see how this builds, because as powerful as HTTP/2 is, no protocol is a perfect silver bullet. While we successfully killed head-of-line blocking at the application layer, the whole system is still built on top of TCP. So if a single TCP packet gets lost in transit, every single multiplex stream sharing that one connection literally has to sit and wait until that one packet is retransmitted. This is known as TCP head-of-line blocking. We successfully fixed the application bottleneck, but in doing so, we completely exposed the transport bottleneck.
Which inevitably brings us to the next evolution, HTTP/3. The standard throws out TCP entirely, replacing it with QUIC over UDP just to solve this final packet loss bottleneck. We fixed the application layer, and now we are fixing the transport layer. But it leaves us with a really provocative question. By moving all that reliability over to UDP, will HTTP/3 finally give us the flawless, zero-latency web experience we've been chasing for decades? Or are we just shifting the bottleneck to an entirely new, unforeseen layer of the network? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep exploring, and I'll catch you next time.